Hey, I'm Adam,
I'm Dave.
and you're listening to Fiction.
Or nonfiction.
Cue music.
Fiction. Or nonfiction.
Hey, this is the program where we go through viral stories, news articles, tall tales, and find out if they are true or false, if they are fiction or...
Nonfiction.
Okay. This one is going to be a little bit interesting. I'm predicting, because I have no idea what the story is going to be.
I
Sometimes...
won't show you.
Yeah, sometimes this is a treat for me. Other times I dread it because I don't know what you're going to share with me. Dave actually has a huge stack of books right next to him, so I don't know what story he's going to share with me.
Don't worry, I didn't read any of them.
Perfect. Okay.
No, actually, I did go through them all. All of these books were taken out from the library here.
So what is the story that you're bringing forward to me?
We have a very popular tale that may be fact or it may be fiction. So I'm going to tell you this story, and I need you to tell me, what is it? Is it true? Is it false? Did this actually happen? And how are we going to prove it? I'll tell you.
I'm shaking with anticipation. Give it to me, Dave.
Okay, so if you're not familiar, I'll give you a short version of this tale. Ozzy Osbourne, famous rock star, Black Sabbath, solo artist.
The Osbournes TV show
Yes.
that we all love him for.
So, January 20th, 1982, Ozzy Osbourne was playing live with his band in Des Moines, and while he was on stage, it is said he bit the head off a real live bat and then spit it out on stage. This fact or fiction?
Okay. I've heard this legend. It's kind of very famous, but legends are spread all the time in rock and roll. It doesn't really mean they're true or not. Now, I heard one time that Ozzy Osbourne was actually told on stage to wear a nice hat, and he misheard somebody, and he bit the head off a bat. So I'm going to say fiction.
Okay. Also, what you just said, I don't think has ever been said. But
Oh, okay.
thanks for that. So you think this is false? He didn't actually bite the head off of a real bat.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I have some news for you. The bat was not made of rubber. It was a real bat.
Emphasis on was.
Was a real bat. So here's the story. I referenced this from a few different articles. Now, these are rock publications. However, I got one from the Washington Post, 2019 article. Pretty trustworthy source there.
Definitely.
They do their research. Here's a quote from an article in 2019. Ozzy Osbourne thought someone told him to bite this bat, and he thought it was rubber. He didn't think it was real. So he put it in his mouth, and he chomped down. Immediately, though, something felt wrong. Very wrong. For a start, this is a quote from Ozzy. For a start, my mouth was instantly full of this warm, gloopy liquid with the worst aftertaste you could ever imagine. I could feel it staining my teeth, running down my chin, and then the head twitched in my mouth. Now, this is from the Washington Post. This is also a quote from Ozzy Osbourne's memoir, I Am Ozzy. So yeah, it wasn't an intentional thing. It actually just was flying around, and he caught it, and he bit the head off of it. So it did actually happen. There were some articles this year, January 20th, for the 40th anniversary of this incident. And I'm going to quote these from Stereo Gum and Rolling Stone. You can find these online. It said on January 20th, Ozzy Osbourne bit the head off a bat during a live show in Des Moines on his Diary of a Madman tour. As the story goes, a teenager apparently smuggled a dead bat into Ozzy Osbourne's show on January 20th, 82, and threw it on stage. Ozzy then proceeded to take a bite from its neck. This is where it gets a little interesting because some of the story changes a bit.
Oh, okay.
So from Rolling Stone, I have a different quote from Ozzy I'd like to read. He said, after, I had to go to the hospital, and they started giving me rabies shots. I had one in the rear, and I had to have one every night until the rabies went away. Well, it was a precaution. But anyway, so yes, it is true. Ozzy did bite the bat. He bit the bat.
He bit the bat.
It was a real bat. So I said earlier that there was a bat flying around, but they don't really say how it got there. But in this one article, it says that someone smuggled a dead bat and then threw it on the stage. But I've also read that it was just a bat that someone threw on the stage, or maybe it was flying around. But this did happen. Ozzy has said this. This has been in multiple articles, multiple sources. It is apparently a fact.
That's interesting, too, because with all of the medical records that would be verified to show that he actually did need to get these shots to offset potential rabies, then, yeah, there's third-party validation of that. So this seemingly unbelievable legend is true.
So there you go.
And Dave, I believe you have a stack of papers there. You have something else that you're going to be asking me.
What I want to talk about is, for this episode, something. I want to talk about something.
Okay, perfect. Something is true.
It's called the guitar. Now.
Okay, the guitar. Interesting. I'm going to say nonfiction. Guitars exist.
No. But my question is to kind of find out the history of it and when it was first a thing.
Oh, okay.
So my question to you is, when was the first classical guitar, let's say classical guitar, like the acoustic guitar that people use nowadays, the model for this, when was that first invented? Because guitars kind of evolved from string instruments, and they've been around a long time, dating back to the 12th century, maybe even earlier. But the classical guitar, the one we're used to playing acoustically, okay, that's what we're going to go with, because there's too much information here.
Okay. It was invented by Jimi Hendrix.
No.
Oh, okay.
That's the electric guitar.
Okay.
We're not saying he invented it, but he definitely revolutionized it with his playing. But what I want to say is this. The guitar, okay? Is this fiction or nonfiction? The guitar was invented in 1685.
Ooh, 1685. Okay, so that's interesting. Now, I've heard different legends about the construction of a guitar, being a modified lute, for example.
Which is true. Variations based on string instruments. There's also an early version called the vihula, Viheula. But we're going based on the modern, like, acoustic, not the origin of when a first string-liked guitar instrument was invented. So.
Oh, okay. Then, you know what? I'm going to say that date sounds about right. I'm going to go with nonfiction.
It's fiction.
Yeah.
It was actually, according to several sources, invented in 1555.
Ah, okay. Going back to 1555. So, Dave, we are going to unearth this, figure out where we got this information from. What sources do you have for this figure?
Well, I did refer to a few different encyclopedia-related sites online, but there's this book that I got from the Riverside Library, actually, called The History of Music in 50 Instruments, and it talks about 50 instruments in music that we use and their evolution and kind of how they were invented and by who. And so, yeah, this book is available to borrow. It's really cool. It's not super long. It's got lots of pictures. But anyways, this guitar, 1555, it has been said that the guitar was invented in Spain, this classical acoustic guitar, by Antonio de Torres. Now, he was a guitar player. He composed music. He's known as a great Spanish guitarist. He composed 78 pieces of music on the instrument and also transcribed works for others. But what I wanted to mention was, before him, there's many versions of the guitar. Before him, there were two other Spanish guitarists that sometimes are often credited. Actually, two different places, one in Spain and one in Italy. If you go back earlier than this, in the 18th and 19th century, guitarist composers kind of emerged in Spain and Italy. Two of the most famous were Neapolitan Fernando Carulli, and you can guess that's probably an Italian name. He was a guitar virtuoso who toured in Europe.
Very Italian, yeah.
Giving concerts and wrote more than 400 works. And then there's another one, the Spanish one, who's also a famous composer. His name's Fernando Sor, and he also traveled Europe, did concerts, and composed music. These two people helped give guitar a wider audience, but it's the Taurus that kind of changed the way the guitar was, made it a little easier to play by modifying the shape of the guitar, giving it kind of the curves that we have where you can put your arm over it. It was a little more awkward before. And then the strings have evolved over the decades as well. But that's what I wanted to talk about, the acoustic guitar. But
So this is my question then, because that's pretty interesting history, but why guitar? Why is that term used for that
Ah,
instrument?
so the English word guitar actually comes from the Spanish word guitarra. It also, before that, it was from a Latin word called the cithara, and it goes even back to ancient Sanskrit to the word tar, which means string. So it's a variation on the
Oh.
word string or strings.
Okay, and that makes sense then.
Yeah, so that's where the definition comes from a few different sources for that. Also, we can't forget about the electric guitar, Adam.
Sure, we can.
Well, we're not going to. So my question to you is, we're going to discuss the electric guitar briefly. In 1931, the Rickenbacker Electro A22 guitar was introduced to the world. It was patented shortly after that. This was a guitar developed by Adolf Rickenbacker and George Beauchamp, both musicians, and this occurred at the end of the 19th century. But here's a bit of a background on this. The electric guitar existed way before that in a different form. I found this on a Popular Mechanics website.
Okay.
So there's a lot of references on there. Anyways, the notion of an electric guitar goes far back, even further, as far back to 1890, when it was patented by an American naval officer named George Breed. He had an early design that didn't use volts to produce volume. So basically, electric guitar, they have pickups in them, and that helps amplify the volume when plugged into an amplifier. His version of the guitar was different. It kind of played itself. It was like a machine.
Oh, almost like an automated piano.
Yeah, it was like a self-playing guitar, as I mentioned, in the 1890s, and he did patent it. But then on the other hand, there's an article from 1928 called The Music Trades, which was a popular newspaper/magazine back then, for a brand new important product, which was called the Stromberg Electro. And what this was is it was an electronically operated device that produces an increased volume of tone for any stringed instrument. Again, it was similar to Breed's design, which basically was like a novelty. What's interesting about this is it featured the first ever commercial pickup, but the following year, in the Chicago Musical Instrument Catalog, he boasted about an electric guitar. Stromberg, it was named after the person that invented it, Stromberg.
Mm-hmm.
He had a guitar with a matching amplifier. Every tone is brought out distinctively and evenly with a louder volume. But then, shortly after that, it vanished. No other mention from the company during this time period, and no instruments to prove any models were actually produced.
So there's no actual record of it existing.
Not other than seeing a few ads, there's no physical thing. Like, no one can find anything.
Okay.
So they are saying this helped herald in a new musical era. This led to eventually George Beauchamp and Adolf Rickenbacker, who are musicians. They wanted more volume for their guitar. So, they kind of helped develop the electric guitar. As mentioned in 1931, the first one was the Rickenbacker, the first commercially available electric guitar. So I got that from some information from pbs.org. 8 things you didn't know about the electric guitar. I'm not going to get into the specifics of how the guitar works. Everyone should know electric guitar, the basics anyway, I hope.
Well, maybe we should get into it just a little bit because, we kind of take it for granted people know what it is. But the idea, very layman's terms, is that when you hit a string on a guitar, it vibrates. And
Yes.
normally, for an acoustic guitar, within the hollow body of the guitar, that vibration resonates, and that's how you get that sound.
Mm-hmm.
For an electric guitar, you have those pickups, like you said, which pick up, as per their name, the vibrations of the string and send a signal through a cable to an amplifier, and that's how that's sent.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's kind of, when we talk about the electric guitar, really what we meant. Although it's interesting that one invention that you talked about that was more of a novelty did include a pickup. So technically that did precede the Rickenbacker model.
Yeah. Stromberg Electro. You can look it up. There's some info online about it. But again, they don't have any physical evidence of it.
So you got some sources from PBS, from Popular Mechanics, and I'm wondering, for listeners, why do we trust those sources? Why do we trust those over other references, other information that we could find online? Let's say, for example, a guitar enthusiast website.
Well, for sites like PBS or even Popular Mechanics, they do their research to provide you with the information, and they're known for doing that. They've been known for doing that for decades. as opposed to an enthusiast who might just really like one particular type of guitar, and maybe they're saying correct things, but you can't trust them because they don't know. They didn't research it. They're just talking.
And there's a bias, potentially. I think the same
Yeah.
thing if something like the Rickenbacker company that produces the Rickenbacker guitar, if they ended up saying that they were the originator of the electric guitar, in some ways you could say it's true, but they have a bias. They have, it's a historical selling point. We created the electric guitar, therefore ours is the best, therefore buy ours. So
Yeah.
I think when it comes from the manufacturers of these products, we always need to scrutinize and we need to consider, is the information they're presenting truthful? And we should always fact check it against an impartial third party, like in this case, Popular Mechanics or PBS.
Yeah, and we should also mention, like, in the 30s, rock music really wasn't a thing yet. That
was more just like banging rocks together, if anything.
very funny.
That was my rock sound.
Ha ha. But what I was gonna say is a lot of people that played it were people that were involved in like orchestral like bands, and also a lot of jazz guitarists.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
So let's go on with one more little story relating to guitars because I think this is very fascinating. There is a story
Yes.
released. You're going to know the answer, but for the
okay.
audience, leave them in suspense.
Oh, okay.
There was this little band from Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up playing in Hamburg, Germany for a bit. They were called the Quarrymen.
Yes, and that was their first name, but they would also go by another name, which is perhaps what they're better known by, the Beatles.
The Beatles,
Yeah.
that's right. So the Beatles actually got kind of a cult following when they were playing in Hamburg, Germany. They were known for these very raucous shows, just really playing with lots of high energy. And they did a demo session for a record label, Decca Records, in which case, after hearing the demo, they turned away the Beatles saying, we don't want to hire them, we don't want to release their records because this electric guitar rock and roll thing is a fad. Is that true or is that untrue? Is that fiction or nonfiction?
I'm going to say it's nonfiction.
You're right. It is actually truth. So this was kind of shared throughout Beatles fandom for years and years as an anecdote, but it was always kind of dubious whether or not this story was true. It was validated in a 2000 publication called The Beatles Anthology.
Yeah, and it's also in some liner notes to some of their anthology releases as well. I think they might have been wrong about that one.
And they may have been. There's a lot of tall tales in rock and roll, but this certainly was not one of them. And what's very interesting is that after rejecting the Beatles and seeing the success they had, not too long after, who did Decca Records sign?
Rolling Stones.
The Rolling Stones. So there you go. Well, that was a very rockin' episode of Fiction.
Or nonfiction.
So make sure to check out our website at windsorpubliclibrary.com for all your research needs. Until then, I'm Adam.
I'm Dave.
And this has been Fiction.
Or nonfiction.